Hello and welcome to week 31. It's a gameplay podcast and I have with me, as I so often do, AirJapes. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you much, Ben. Happy to be back chatting on another gameplay pod, though my gameplay volume has increased and it turned out well for me this weekend. Snagging a little rank 1, which it's been a minute since I played a full weekend, so that felt quite good and I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, we've got another rank 1 player on the podcast actually, but it's not our next guest. Hello, Josh. Welcome back.
Oh, you absolute jeez. Yeah, thanks for that introduction. Great to be here.
I mean, I can introduce myself like that as well, but
I was going to say Ben's got to get his own introduction again.
I did get a rank 2 last year, but I haven't even got close. I'm blaming this US internet and the sweaty US players for that. But anyway, we can introduce the other rank 1 player on this podcast. It is Bateson87, who needs no introduction. Hello, welcome.
How are you doing? It's been a while since I've been on the podcast, so and invited on for gameplay of all things as well.
Well, yeah, I heard about the 20-0 and thought about time for a call-up. And, I mean, did that continue this last weekend? Or
So 2 weeks ago, I went 20-0.
Yeah.
I don't know how it happened. And then I was like, I might keep going the following weekend. Got 20-0 again.
Oh, it is a back-to-back. I don't know.
Wow. And then I thought, I'm going to go for 60. And then I lost on game number 48. So nice little record to have there.
But that does kind of make you feel like a bit like a pro. You know how they say they've gone like 140-0 or whatever it is. That's nice to get somewhere near that.
If you had to attribute the 40-0 to like one player being like worthy of the best player during that run, who would it be?
I would probably go with the World Cup 𝗵𝘃𝘃.
Oh, that is controversial.
Oh, yes! Yes!
Japes hates the World Cup 𝗵𝘃𝘃.
Oh, it's just 𝗵𝘃𝘃 in general. He's just an absolute, he's so big, he's got massive legs, and there's no one on the game which is similar to him. Just having to stay back with the defense, and he just seems to pop up out of nowhere and save me.
I have dogged on that 𝗵𝘃𝘃 ever since I took him. And for the first time, though, Ben, playing this like 4-2-3-1, 𝗵𝘃𝘃𝘃 was a black hole in the midfield.
Wow.
And I was like, this is the first time that I'm happy I picked 𝗵𝘃𝘃 over Cafu.
Wow. And talking of players and how they've been doing for us, it's time for a few player reviews. Obviously better if they're more recently released. Someone people could potentially pick up and try, but not Bateson, that R9.
All right, okay, I was lining that one up then.
Yeah, I thought that might be coming. But, I mean, you have used him. You might as well let us know.
I can give a little mini review on him because obviously it's a massive change. It's the first time we've ever seen an Ronaldo on FIFA with high medium work rates. Every other version of him is medium. And I thought this is going to be unreal. So after using him this weekend, he's burnt out by halftime because his stamina is 82.
Interesting.
And I'm starting to think, even though the dynamic image looks cool, I believe the 96 could be better purely because you don't really want to change in your best striker in your team halfway through a game.
He also got a big aggression boost, didn't he? It was like plus 24 or something like that. One tip, which is going to apply to other players, not just Ronaldo. I don't know whether you've tried this, but if you put the player on conservative interceptions, it actually reduces the stamina drain by quite a lot. So that might be worth trying. I don't know whether you have, just to see if that gives him enough stamina.
No, I'm always all ears when it comes to advice, so I'll definitely try that for the next weekend.
Give that a go, because I used to do that a lot with the various 𝗵𝘃𝘃𝘃 cards who had low stamina, right? And it helps quite a bit. And obviously, you're normally manually pressing with your striker anyway. Rarely they're going to get an interception themselves. So I think it's worth doing. And in terms of more affordable options, I mean, even if there are a few million, I guess we'll let that go.
So I was looking at a player today, because I do draft quite a lot, as well as play weekend league on obviously Friday and Saturday and Sunday. I play draft a lot, and there was a player which popped up in my draft today, which is 𝘵𝘃𝘃, 90 rated 𝘵𝘃𝘃. And I can't remember the last time I've seen him ever. And I didn't realize he'd jumped to a 90. So I started comparing him on a FUT website.
FUT.gg, of course.
Yeah. To see what he's like compared to 𝘃𝗲𝗏. And it turns out he's a spitting image. Same height, same work rates. And I think he's got 25 less in-game stats. But he's very, very similar, apart from 160k, and one of them is 1.3 million. And he could potentially, if the team that he plays for draws or wins the next 2 games, he could go to a 91 as well. So maybe a cheap pickup for someone looking for a La Liga right back.
Yeah, he looks so good. 90 aggression as well, and 91 short passing.
Yeah, as I was playing with him today, it was unreal in draft.
Nice. What about you, Josh? Do you have anyone that you wanted to kind of review or talk a bit more about, I guess, because we have done the Content Pod, the supporter episode this week. I'll plug, of course, you can become a supporter, just search Support FUT Weekly and listen to that episode. But is there anyone you wanted to go a bit more in depth on?
Yeah, there is. I do like the advice of, if you're going for an R9 Ronaldo, the 96 is probably better than the 97, just for all those people that can afford it. I also saw that you will have made like 5 million on it because there's none on the market and his price range is 19 million. I think you bought yours for 14, didn't you?
So I can jump in there because that's like a myth and it's always been a myth.
Is it?
Yeah. So he is available to be listed for 19 million. That is his price range on the item. But FIFA only allows you to list for 15 million on any card. So I think the last one, which was similar to him, was the World Cup R9 when that was released. I think the price range might have been 17 million. But you always hit at the 15. But I actually got him for 14 million somehow. Some casual player must have listed him up.
Decent little 250k profit there after that 750k of tax. Ooh.
Yeah, I am tempted to sell after this weekend as well.
Trades in 87 striking again.
Yeah. But my I don't like being a rat, right?
You do that.
Sometimes the game, yeah, you do. But sometimes the game presents you with the opportunity to be one. And sometimes you've got to take it. And I have been a staunch, I am not using World Cup Owairan person for the longest time. And a couple of weeks ago, in one of the picks, it offered him up. And I know he's got a better version now, but he's ridiculously good. It makes no sense. He glitches through people. He's faster than everyone else on the pitch. I don't get it. I just don't get it. I played him as a secondary striker, like in a two-striker formation, and alongside 𝘵𝘃𝘁𝘁, because I thought I had to even it out. And he's so good, and it's really annoying. I don't understand how you look at his stats and they're all right, but that World Cup version, it's just all right. Like, he's fast and he's got semi-decent dribbling for now, and he still performs to like this ridiculous level. And I'm eventually going to end up with him and 𝘵𝘃𝘁𝘁 and 𝘬𝘯𝘦 up front. I just know it because it's silly how good they are.
Yeah, and he's also very versatile. He has quite a few positions, doesn't he? On the card, which is nice. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see him.
Yeah, that distributor in the cam roll for sure. Yeah, I'm definitely
that's what 𝗏𝗡s tried when he was trying not to be sweaty.
It didn't work at all. You got to put him out wide and let the man run.
Yeah, it is crazy. I mean, yeah, I think that also max pace really does allow for much better chemistry style use, right? And that is important to say. The boost you get out of a marksman or 𝘄𝘃𝗽, etc., can be really, really good, where a lot of the time you're wanting to boost the pace a bit, especially playing a player out wide. So, yeah, I think he does have a good stat makeup as well. 𝗏𝗡s, what about you? Anyone you wanted to mention this week?
I mean, I've mentioned 𝗏𝗪𝘏 being kind of a low-key baller a couple times. He seems to score. I played him as my right attacking mid. He seems to score a lot of goals for me. I'm going to give another shout out though to Carlos Alberto, that SBC. He definitely made an impact. And then I will concede my Vieira argument. Now that I'm using him in a more traditional Vieira role, I'm going to have a hard time replacing him. And he partners really, really well with that. Was it Winter Wild Cards? I don't know, the 𝘭𝘪𝘁𝗏𝗃 card that has 99 dribbling. He and Vieira make for quite a combo.
Yeah. Because does Kimmich have a high attacking work rate? Medium defensive?
I believe so.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he? Yeah, so that is quite nice. Talking midfielders, I will mention Marchisio, and I used him, this is the SBC, the Trophy Titans hero, in only 5 games. I should say this was just a loan. So, take that with a grain of salt. Don't want to say that this is the complete review that, you would get out of most players we talk about on the podcast. But I used him in a midfield 3 as the left centre mid. I think he probably would have been better on the right, actually, just because, he is more right-footed than he is left. But I still felt like that was a good position to put him in. I put Hunter on him, and I was just really disappointed for someone who's 1 million coins, or more than that, actually 1.2 million. And he's not that tall. He's not that strong. He's not that aggressive. He's also not that fast. And I just felt like he was in this kind of weird zone where he's just like okay or quite good at everything and not particularly exceptional at anything. And you might think, oh, that's really good for a midfielder. And it is, but not for a 1.2 million coin midfielder, right? And if you look at some of the other SBCs that are around at the moment, like they're just all pretty much better value than that and all better places to put your fodder. And I don't even know that the Serie A Italy links are necessarily going to be super valuable. So yeah, it was a bit of a shame. I was a bit disappointed. And he's someone that I really enjoyed in past FUT games when, he was in the game as a regular player. And yeah, he's just not that special. So that was a shame. And he will be okay, but I just, wouldn't encourage people to go out and do him. So yeah, a bit of a more negative review this week, but that is what it is. I was going to move on actually to asking you, Bates, what tactic are you running at the moment? What's your kind of go-to? I know you play draft as well, so I guess you probably use a number of different tactics in that, but your main team, what's been the go-to?
I actually came about my tactics on my main team via a video idea which I had, because I'd just been at the 𝘵Premier League a few weeks ago with and watching Stokes win the 𝘵Prem with 𝘵𝑚𝑙𝑖𝑡𝑜. So I reached out to Stokes to see if he had, and I think I've got the DM actually. I said to him, if you had unlimited coins, unlimited access to any player, no restrictions, what team would you build? And also what tactics would you run with which formation? And he sent over the formation, he sent over the tactics. And I've been rocking Stokes' tactics for the 48-0.
Nice.
This weekend, it just didn't feel that good though, but I'm not sure if it's patch, not sure if it's connection or what, but maybe I was feeling off a bit, but it still works good. I still got 14, but it is very, very dangerous. And I know a lot of my stream have picked up the tactics themselves and had a play around. I don't have them off the top of my head though, which is an issue.
Yeah, that's all right.
You can find it on my YouTube. Can I go 20-0 with a team built by a pro? Is it along them lines?
Yeah, you run through the tactics there, right? So it's probably easier for people to digest than you telling them here.
It was the first time I've started rocking the 4-3-2-1 as well, but it doesn't play like a 4-3-2-1. It's interesting, but obviously with the team and players I have, you can get away with a lot of human errors.
I'm interested because you kind of have this like blank check, and I wonder if, because for a lot of people, it's like the grind of Ultimate Team that has made it fun. And I wonder if, as somebody who has that blank check and can go and get whoever they want, does it remove some of the enjoyment from that, or do you like having maybe like a Road to Glory account that you can go and do that on instead, kind of thing?
So last year I actually did a Road to Glory. It was a very successful one in terms of like the team I had with it. But it's always a thing with every game around the world. You got a choice. You can either put money in to speed up the progress, or you can put time in to get the same progress, basically. And loads of YouTubers and streamers and content creators have proven that you can get to the levels of a crazy team. But one of the things which I wanted to do with my content, I've done it since 2012 now, is I wanted to be that person who, because everyone loves window shopping. Everyone likes going down the streets looking at what they can't have. And they can see that with the content that I make. It might not be something which you think they would want to watch, but in the back of your mind, you always want to see how a player performs. Like, does a 15 million coin 9799 play as like a 15 million value player? And I just like having the best of the best. It's like today on stream, I still do have that one account, which is no FIFA points. And that is my Draft to Glory account, which I do 7 episodes every week, 7 drafts a week, and I play that on stream. And I think I've got about 3.3 million on there, liquid. So I still have the fun with no FIFA points, but it's in draft. But yeah, my main focus is, I do enjoy playing the game, but I also enjoy making limitless content with no restrictions, basically.
I suppose like that's a bit more maybe like content side of things, but bringing it back to gameplay, a kind of follow-up to that would be is, as someone who has used the best players in the game, how much of an effect do you think team has on the outcome of your games?
So I'm going to compare it from last year to this year, because last year I did the Road to Glory. I had a decent-ish team, but people wouldn't really treat me as if I was going to be a good player, because it was a very obscure team with a few icons thrown in there. And I actually had better results on the Road to Glory last year than I did on the Pay to Win last year. Whereas this year and it was the same last year as well. When you see my team, you know what's happening. And I can, like all 3 of you in here, if you saw my team in the matchup screen, what are you doing?
You're leaning forward.
Music, yeah.
Yeah, you
Leaning
forward.
forward,
You're sitting forward and you are trying your hardest. So imagine me playing 20 games, and it happens, and they come in the stream and they're like, "Oh, I finally beat you," and they're gritting on me and stuff. But it is like 20 of the hardest games I've ever played every weekend. I'm so tired by the end of it. Whereas on a Road to Glory, it's not, doesn't feel as hard because people don't respect the team and respect the player. Whereas when they see that team, like, yeah, I want to say that I beat this team this weekend to my friends.
Yeah, I can imagine actually. Well, we should talk about the other 20-0, which is yours, Japes, and how that came about. I understand you're definitely attributing that quite a bit to the tactics, which will be out probably by the time people are listening to this in your weekly newsletter, which people can find, Japes.
Yep. �p2psnacks.substack.com.
Nice. And so what's the summary and what was the thinking behind the move?
Yeah, I started, I don't know, I think I went back to basics in some ways and went back to like a old 4-2-3-1 tactic from like years past for me, where it's still, here's the tactic. Press on possession loss, 30 width, 65 depth, balanced and build up and chance creation, 55 width, 7 in the box, 1 and 1 for the final 2. And I just find that I score more corners from that setup because it creates, you create more like passing options to pass it into the box than having extra players to play it in. So you can use whatever you want. It's for the corners and the free kicks. But I think the like interesting thing for this setup is we're at like that point in the cycle where, in my opinion, I'm like starting to believe that telling players to do too much is detrimental to how they'll perform. And so the only instructions that I put on anybody on my squad, I put stay central, stay forward on the strikers, and get into the box on the wide attacking mids. And that is it. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, no, like not trying to do anything super crazy, just letting the matches come to me and not trying to like force anything in particular. And it worked a treat. So, and my front four was good, but I wouldn't, when you see 𝘵𝘵𝘃𝗀𝘀, the flashback Mane, 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦's new card, and Owairan, you're like, yeah, maybe I got to watch out for Aloe, but those aren't the FUT items that you're coming up against and going, oh no, like I have to deal with this front four. So there's definitely room for improvement in my squad as well. And, I'm still using like baby Roberto Carlos as my left back. So I all this to say, like, maybe letting some of the items choose how to interact in the game is not such a bad thing, even if they're not at these like, insane levels. And I think there's been this like trend and movement, and I've certainly, bought into it, where there's such a heavy focus on custom tactics. And there are always meta tactics that work, and that 5-4-1 is ever popular now is really frustrating to play against. But all that to say, like, you can use very, very balanced tactics, have a good time, and still have success.
Yeah. And you raised a good point, which I was going to move us on to actually briefly, is that 5-4-1 or 5 at the back tactics, actually also 3 at the back tactics, are getting increasingly common. Well, they are really common, to be honest. Does anyone have a particular approach to playing against them? One thing I would definitely say just off the bat is be patient, especially if it's a 5 at the back. What they want to do is get that early goal, and then they can sit deep and basically counter you the whole time and make it very difficult for you. So that is important. But from a tactical perspective, does anyone have any particular approaches? I know Josh, actually, I think you were talking about 4-2-4 earlier in the cycle, and that's something that can work quite well against it, right?
Yeah, so I like 4-4-2 seems to be a base that a lot of people tend to go back to. But I very early on, just because it suited me for chemistry reasons, was in 4-2-4, and found that even with like not having instructions or anything, it was a really fun formation to use. It creates shapes you don't really get in a 4-4-2. Especially if you're chasing a game. If you're up against a 3-back, having 4 attackers that are naturally attacking in terms of their base position, it it overloads massively people's defenses. And even if they try and sit deep and sit in like a stock back, if you notice like their, because usually it's a 3-5-2 or 3-4-1-2, some version of that. If you notice their left and right mids are on comeback on defense and they're essentially defending in like a tight 5 with a midfield in front, if you then get your wing backs just on balance, not like overlapping, don't go total football, but if you just get them pushing up the pitch, there's too many players for the amount of defenders to mark, especially in the wide areas. And depends how ratty your opponent's playing, but when you have that much space, it's very easy to do that little dance along the byline and cut it back for a tap in. And I still find it, I always have it as one of my 5 formations to switch into, just because against even 5 backs, I find it really, really effective. Like, it's super attacking, but I kind of like it for that.
And I was going to ask you actually, Bateson, I know that the 4-3-2-1, a lot of pros, and actually the reason why I think the 5 and 3 at the backs became popular was to counter the 4-3-2-1, which I guess you've been playing. Did you find it trickier to play against those 3 at the back tactics particularly? Did you have anything you did to get a leg up against them?
It was purposely keeping the ball switching, like passing from like I run 𝘃𝗲𝘃𝗲 and 𝗪𝗂𝘃𝗲. They were the 2 outlets in the team. Switching between them and making them drag players out. Because a lot of people, when they do play that, I want to sit back. So you can just pass it around the midfield. They'll want to pull out. And I've seen a lot more success through my crossing goals this past 3 weeks, purely because of the full power cross to the back post. And either 𝘬𝘯𝘰𝗍𝘗 or 𝗵𝗍𝗽 is there just to tap it in, which is not something I've seen all year, actually. But that was one of the tactics which Stokes told me to try and do. I believe they call it a German cross.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'm doing it right, so I renamed it the 𝘂𝑚brian cross, which is just a hit and a hope, and it works.
Nice. Yeah. So that's actually just full power cross. It goes to the back post, and then you head it in from there.
Yeah, or if you're a bit more clever, head it back across to the striker, who's usually there for a single tap-in, which is... just seen so many different types of goals I've scored in the past 3 weeks purely off the formation change.
Nice. And in terms of the tactic, is the tactic one of those bring a fullback forward ones? Right? Do you have a left back or right back?
Yeah. Yes. So ḥakimi's on stay back while attacking overlap, and 𝘃𝗲𝘃𝗲 is the main, because a lot of people don't think that 𝘃𝗲𝘃𝗲 is going to be the player which you attack with. They think ḥakimi will be that guy. So they don't really show any interest when you go up with 𝘃𝗲𝘃𝗲, but he's so deadly with crossing, shooting, passing. And he's pretty good at getting back as well, which is obviously what you want in a defender. But I did notice his stamina burn this week. It's two players noticed on stamina burn, but I'm going to take your advice with the changing conservative on both of them and see if that makes any difference.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because you can do the conservative interceptions to reduce stamina drain, but you can actually do aggressive to increase it and make them a bit more proactive in terms of trying to intercept, which actually, if they have high stamina or you're going to sub them off, I'd actually recommend if you want to be a bit more aggressive. But it'll be interesting with team of the season coming. I think, that'll be more common probably that you can do that without it affecting stamina drain too much. And I think actually, with the types of players that we could see, there could be quite a few kind of gameplay differences to look out for.
I'm looking forward to team of the season because you're going to see so much meta gameplay change and different tactics just because of the players which are available pretty cheap.
Yeah, looking forward to that, just like I'm looking forward to part 2 of this podcast in just a second. But let's head into the break and I'll tell you about something that is very relevant to team of the season, and that is a team of the season giveaway. We're giving away 36,000 FIFA points over on the Patreon. So if you've been considering supporting but not yet sealed the deal and done it, then this is a great time to do so. Because not only do you get an extra podcast every week, a supporter exclusive episode, this week the content podcast, next week it'll be the gameplay podcast, but there are loads of other perks as well, and that 36,000 FIFA point giveaway. Oh, and you'll be keeping the podcast going, of course, because supporters are what makes this podcast possible and what makes the podcast weekly. And what's more, you can get all that for just £3 a month, or whatever that is in your local currency. There are quite a few available. You'll find that 36,000 FIFA point giveaway over on the Patreon just by searching support for weekly. And you can also follow the link in the description of this podcast directly to that giveaway, which is bit.ly/tots23. So bit.ly/TOTS in caps 23. Thank you very much if you consider supporting. It is greatly, greatly appreciated. And a huge thank you too if you already do. Right, let's get back into the rest of the podcast. Hello, welcome back, listeners and supporters. Japes, Josh, and Bateson still with me. We're going to get into some listener gameplay questions, starting with this one, actually from friend of the pod, Hugh. He says, Bateson, as someone who's used many of the elite cards in the game, do you feel like certain cards have a certain special sauce, for lack of a better word, that play beyond their stats? For example, Ginola's base card has 75 balance and 84 reactions, but you feels so dominant in the game. Do you pay much attention to body type, height or weight, for example? And do you think that certain specific cards are just hardwired to be better than others? And I guess, more broadly, are you someone who feels like you really notice the difference between the very highest level players and like tier below?
Yeah, it's icons. It's since the game into the game as Legends back in the Xbox days when they had the exclusivity, it just felt as if the icons had that extra bit of juice, extra bit of power, which was never on the card. And you back in FIFA, I can't remember which FIFA it was, FIFA 15, FIFA 16, everyone was running around with Matthäus, Vieira and 𝘍𝘁. And obviously the body types of them players are pretty unique. Got Vieira and 𝘍𝘁 who are pretty beastly trucks, but are very agile and fast at the same time. And you got a whippersnapper of Matthäus as well. I always say the icons have something hidden in them. And it's probably why 90% of my team is always icon, purely because of that, surrounded by team of the years, because they're pretty mental at team of the years with the pace boost they get.
Yeah, one thing that we did find out, which I do think is probably the thing that people are talking about when they mention this, is the producers, the gameplay producers, when they're on the podcast over the summer, mentioned that reactions affect dribbling, animation playback speed, or maybe even just playback speed of animations generally. And pretty much all icons, right, especially the top end ones, have high reactions. They've also got high composure, and they have often the unique body type. So although I get that people like, oh, there's a special sauce or whatever, I do think often it is that. Ginola's a bit weird because he does have low reactions and not great balance, but he does have that kind of physical shape, which kind of reminds you of like a 𝘍𝘁, and his kind of other stats, including having ridiculously high agility for his size, are very unique. So I can kind of see why he is a bit different despite his reactions. Anything else to add on that, Japes or Josh, actually, before we move on?
No, I mean, I love my reactions.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like the first thing that I look at.
There is one stat, I mean, it's slightly different, but just in that, like a stat that you don't think about affecting things that you wouldn't assume that it affects. But I've noticed recently when I've been testing out players, if I really like their passing, they tend to have 90 plus curve because they bend, like especially through balls, much more than players that have, say, like 80s in their curve stat. It's something I like. It was maybe like the third or fourth player I tried where I was like, I really like their passing. I was like, oh, they got like 96 curve. And then you start seeing the bend they're putting on, even like chip through balls, just kind of putting it round the back of a defense. So yeah, like I definitely think that working out the stats that suit your play style, like some people really love aggressive defenders, players with really high aggression. And especially if you're someone who likes to get the ball back quickly, that can always really help. So yeah, it's how the stats interact with each other. It's one of those things that when obviously the game being an esport, we don't actually really know how an awful lot of the stats interact or what animations they cause or the difference between, I don't know, what a 95 long passer has with 90 long passer and how their composure and how close a player is and their curve and balance and how it affects all of it. So definitely trying to pinpoint that, I think, can give you a little bit of an extra edge when you're looking at cards that maybe other people are overlooking.
Yeah. That's a very good point. I think if you look out for these things, you can often find better value. And actually, I'll move on to this question because I think it reminds me of something that I know, Bates, you've talked about in the past about defending. So I'll mention that at the end. But Mate Ballot says, any tips for player switching / right stick switching, which is always something people tend to struggle with. There can be issues because of connection. I mean, there are definitely just challenges with player switching generally. Maybe it's mechanics within the game, but it's definitely something people always ask about. But specifically to you, Bates, I remember you talking before, I think when you were last on the podcast, about a specific technique you use to defend, which basically involves kind of like, I'd almost call it like false pressing an opponent. And I think people would be probably quite interested in hearing how to do that.
So it's very high risk, very high reward. And so sometimes it works, and other times you can find yourself 5-0 down. So basically when you're jockeying with a player, or not even jockeying, just like dribbling around with a player, usually it's Vieira or Gullit for me in the midfield, you back off. The player thinks, oh, well, he's backing off, we'll go forward. Then you go forward, and then he panics, you go back, and it's like a game of cat and mouse where you're just confusing him in what you're doing. And he'll either dribble into you, he'll pass back, or make a loose pass. But the players I struggle with the most are the ones which just keep on running.
Yep.
They just run in a straight line. And I'm like, right, he's going to stop. I'm going to back off now and then bait him. But no, he just keeps on running and runs all the way. And I'm like, well, that's my day ruined. But they're the players which I struggle the most with that technique, are the players who just run through the middle.
Yeah, because
I think I had a game today with it as well.
We actually had a question last week about defending, essentially very good dribblers, people who are really nippy on the ball and move around a lot. But yeah, with the technique you're using, I guess that's a good way to defend those players. So basically you give them the space in front of them, right, for them to kind of come into. And then do you go back in and run towards them so that they may actually run into you?
Yeah, so you either want them to run into you or run away. And more than likely they'll end up running into you, because sometimes you'll go part forward, and then sometimes you'll just run straight at them. With the likes of Vieira, you can do that, because if they try and make a pass, his legs are massive, so more likely his leg is going to get in the way of that anyway. If you're in a game where you're pinned back though, and you've got all your defenders back, all your midfielders back inside the area, you don't really want to be doing that. You just want to be keeping your players in the correct positions. Like if you notice a player out of position, dragging back into the place, because one of the best techniques I was told recently is do not press that tackle button. It's so hard to trust yourself not to press the tackle button, but you'll see so much success from it, whether it be blocks, whether it be tackling. The players are just geared up enough to do it, especially with all the high-rated items coming into FIFA now. You're going to see a lot more complaints about auto blocks and auto tackles. But that's what happens with the bait. You're not pressing tackle, you're not pressing slide. You're just moving around with the player and forcing them to make the mistakes.
Yeah, nice. No, it's a good technique. It's something I use every now and again. But yeah, as you say, I try not to use it.
It looks very erratic, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes you look like you don't know what you're doing.
It was. So FIFA 17 was when FIFA became sweaty. That was when the birth of FUT champions came, and I used to play Guerrilla all the time. One thing he will do is he will concede goals, but he'll always outscore you. And then I learned that technique from him, and it's I don't know if he still does it anymore. I probably should check, but I still do it, and it's probably the reason why he's a pro and I'm not.
Yeah, it's funny because Tom Lees, the other Tom, was on the podcast, and he mentioned that one thing that he actually added to his game, funny enough, was tackling more. And I think a lot of pros, especially, or people at high level, do want to do what you said, which is not press the tackle button. But he was finding that was to his detriment, I think, because you do want to press the tackle button if you're in an area where it's not too dangerous, right? And where you are trying to put pressure on, because in this game, I mean, it's pretty frustrating, but Mbappe can stand tackle like nobody else, right? So it is worth doing it in those situations. But yeah, once you're ending up camped out on the edge of your box, especially if you're against a sort of possession player, it's a good point. You don't want to just be making that tackle. That's what they want. And I think that was kind of a tangent. I knew it would end up being a tangent. But to come back to the question about player switching itself, Japes, is there anything that you particularly find useful? I mean, an important point to make is that right stick switching is obviously what you should do. Is the better way to switch. You obviously shouldn't have auto switching on for player switching. You should have air balls and loose balls, or maybe just loose balls, actually. I guess what I was interested to know from you, Japes, is how frequently would you say you use right stick switching compared to the LB?
I'd say I use it a lot more when I'm playing well.
As in right stick a lot more, yeah.
Yeah. If you can get in the habit, because right stick gives you just a lot more control over, because I use it, my defensive style, I would say I like oftentimes sprint straight at a player and will like guess one side. Like I'll sprint straight at a player and be like, okay, he's going to turn, I bet he's going to turn left. And I'll drag my defender over to try to or take the ball away and make a tackle if he goes that way. The opposite end of that, though, is if I miss, then I end up in a situation where I have to switch very, very quickly because oftentimes there's like an obvious pass and the right stick switch allows me to like guess rather rapidly. And if I'm missing, just switch to the defender that I want and then step in front of the obvious pass. So the game doesn't always say, this is like where you're going to want to defend if you miss this tackle, right? So you just have to be, I don't know, I guess like ready, and the right stick just gives you more control. It also allows for like better pressing. And so like when you're trying to press someone's backline, you can oftentimes right stick switch over to cover like if it looks like they're going to play like the big pass across, you can right stick switch over to cover that pass. And I don't know, it just gives you more flexibility. And so when I'm playing well, I'm reading the game better. And so I'm right stick switching more than reacting to the game, which is what I do when I'm using the left bumper.
Yeah, I think good advice. And let's move on to Josh. Any particular recommendations for you?
No, not really. Not like, for me, I really hated the player switching at the beginning of the year. The like arrow that came up on the pitch to like show how hard you were pulling it just always kind of messed up, and I didn't feel like it did the right thing anytime. Switching. Yeah, that was it. So I always switched to classic and find that works better. For me, if you can flick on the stick and be consistent with it, it's so much better than asking the game to guess which player you want to switch to. I just feel like I like to turn as much of the player switching off as possible and make it just a skill thing, because if I can just be better than what the game suggests and my opponent is just using the bumper to switch, I'm going to have a tactical advantage or a skill advantage, essentially. It's one of those things that if you're not used to it, it can take a while to get used to, but being able to flick on the stick and know where you're going so that you can have your positioning of where you want to then move that defender you're switching to and be confident you know who you're going to, it makes such a difference.
Well, that's the big thing. If you're not that confident, it may be better not to do it, because you can defend pretty well without.
I mean, there are players that don't switch at all.
Yeah, especially if you're struggling with connection or what have you. It's sometimes better not to. And if you're not so experienced with it, it's often tricky to take that step up and improve your defensive game through that, because it is hard to get adjusted to right stick switching more. And actually, one tip I'd have if people are interested in doing a bit more right stick switching, or in fact, I guess a tip that's maybe more appropriate for people who aren't really doing it at all. But if you use right stick switching to move away from the player you're currently using to press the ball, and then hold R1/RB for the second man press, that will send the player you were controlling to second man press and continue to apply the pressure while you can try and cut off a passing lane or the pass they're going to play. And the great thing is that if you want to switch back to the player who's pressing the ball, because you're right bumper pressing them with second man press, you'll automatically go back to that player when you press the L1 or LB button. So it's quite easy to get back into the player you were controlling before if you feel like you've made the wrong choice in terms of the player you switched to. And I mean, that can just throw your opponent off and be quite helpful. Anyway, we should probably move on to this question. We talked a bit about Accelerate last week, but I thought it was worth covering again, maybe getting some of Bateson's thoughts. But essentially, the question here from NJ Renegade is about what Accelerate types people are using after the patch. So yeah, Bates, any particular preferences?
I can tell the difference. I do like controls on my defenders. And then, yeah, I'm not really that bothered about it. I know there was a lot of hype around it at the start, but with the players jumping up to the ratings that they're at now, and obviously I'm using the top tier ones as they come out, you don't really notice a difference anyway between lengthy and controlled and explosive. I used to really not like explosive because they would burn out so fast, but no issues at all with it anymore.
Yeah, maybe that shows they've done a decent enough job in terms of balancing that finally after a number of patches across the course of the cycle. Or maybe it's just getting towards the end of the cycle. Josh, you mentioned this before, where actually far less players are lengthy because they're getting higher agility, and once a player's over 86 agility, 86 or above, they can't be length anymore, basically. Japes, what about you? Any particular preferences in terms of Accelerate type for forwards, for example?
I mean, I think I prefer explosive maybe in the attack.
Yeah.
Here's what's interesting, because I think 𝗟𝗑𝗪 is controlled as well, because I'm using Hunter on him, so I think he's controlled. I am seemingly preferring explosive players in the middle of the, like as my striker and attacking mid, where I need them to be able to turn and move rather quickly, and preferring controlled players out wide where they can like bomb forward seemingly if they need to.
Yeah. I have had more success recently with explosive midfielders after the patch, and it feels like both defensively, which people kind of underrate, you can get quite a nice advantage being able to accelerate quickly to get to interceptions, put pressure on players and things like that, which has been quite nice. Because previously, I felt like controlled or lengthy in midfield was more helpful, even though explosive was still okay there. But I've certainly, found that explosive wide players feel a lot better, and dribbling with explosive players feels noticeably better since the patch. And I brought back in 𝘵𝘂𝘃 even to give him a go to see whether he was like viable because of the patch. And actually, although he was good before, just because his stats were really good, right? At the time he was released, now he actually kind of has had a bit of like a revitalization because of that. He felt actually okay. Like I would obviously prefer a better player. Stats aren't amazing, but just that explosive close control can kind of catch out your kind of lengthy, slower defenders. So that's been kind of interesting. What about you, Josh? Any comments on Accelerate?
Only that I feel like your play style now affects kind of what players you want, especially in attack. I think if you're much more of a counter attacker, I still think lengthy is a very useful thing to have somewhere in your front line. But if you're someone who likes to hold the ball a bit more and kind of progress it up the pitch and then likes to kind of be a little bit tricky inside the box, the buff in the patch to explosive off the mark, I think has made a big difference when you're trying to kind of create a little bit of space in the box, whether it's coming out of a skill move or just that kind of, even if you're just left stick dribbling and then kind of just tap sprint to push it away from you. I find it makes a massive difference. The one thing I would keep an eye out for, I think, as we move towards team of the season, is for players with high acceleration that are also lengthy. You spoke about Ramos, I can't remember if it was in this podcast or the content podcast, who has 90 acceleration and is lengthy. And the combination of high acceleration and lengthy is deadly. It will be worth just keeping an eye out for players that might get there. Right now, in terms of players who've got more than 90 base acceleration and are naturally lengthy, there's only 6 of them. One of them's a team of the week like a team of the week from team 2, and it's 𝘬𝘁 Rodriguez, and the other one, and there's another one that's a goalkeeper. But the big one on there is team of the year Haaland. And if you've ever used him in draft, or if you've ever had the luck of actually using him in game, his speed is a joke. So it's one of those things that I think will still be important. It will be interesting if they change the criteria for lengthy as we move into team of the season, because it's 14 difference you need in agility and strength. I wonder if that will decrease, because if people are getting massively boosted stats, it's going to be very difficult to have that massive difference that will push you to either lengthy or explosive. So if they change that and change it across the board, it might make some players lengthy that have been controlled up until now. So another thing to potentially look out for.
Yeah, for sure. And we're pretty much ready to wrap up now, actually. But I did want to just close maybe with some thoughts from Bateson about gameplay, because we haven't had you on the podcast at all this cycle. It'd be interesting to hear what you make of this particular game. We talked quite a bit about this on last week's Supporter Gameplay podcast. But yeah, what have you made of FIFA 23 so far anyway?
So I have enjoyed this FIFA. I much more enjoyed it when Trivela shots flew in from every angle at the start. But obviously EA didn't enjoy that, and neither did half of the community. But I've been saying in my streams recently that I think in a couple of years' time, people will look back on this FIFA and think this was actually quite good gameplay compared to the 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 crossing the first time. Like, you always remember something, and I can't really remember anything which has really ruined my day on this FIFA gameplay. I've enjoyed it from start to finish, to be fair. And I think EA have done a very good job of patching the things which needed patching.
Yeah, I think that is true. And we gave the game credit for that, I think, on the last episode when we talked about gameplay concerns, that there weren't any horribly overpowered mechanics, and it was more an issue with AI and balancing, maybe not so obvious, but certainly still issues there. That being said, I think both 𝗏𝗧𝗏 and I have had much worse connections this cycle. I certainly have. The jitter is really quite poor on the connection that I have here. And I don't know whether that's something, 𝗏𝗧𝗏, you thought about at all, and whether the success you've had recently has changed your mind or made you think again after last week's little rant.
I mean, winning is fun.
Yeah.
I think I've enjoyed a lot of gameplay over the course of the year. I think it's that time in the cycle, though, where those of us that are left and still playing the game pretty significantly, like everybody's a pretty decent player, but you also have folks that are more than happy to figure out what's broken and try to exploit that. So I think I enjoyed gameplay because I got to play in a style that I felt wasn't like particularly like deemed meta, and was, I think more so I was just like less concerned about what other people are doing and trying to counter them and just sort of played. So I think the TLDR advice is just like worry less about other people and what they're doing, and just kind of like do what you think sounds fun.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice. A good place to end this podcast on. And we can say, Bateson, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It's been good to have you back on after a long time.
No, it's a pleasure. Hopefully your tactics can help me get another 20-0 next weekend.
Yeah, the pod will be taking full credit if that's the case. We should say, actually, I'm sure people know where to find you, but you're on Twitch a lot and people might not know that, I guess. Yeah,
probably better to check me out there, because if you've got any questions or anything, I do read the chat now and then, just when I'm not in a hard game of FIFA.
Yeah. And if he is, you'll get to see that fake press that he does. And thank you very much, Bateson. Again, we'll say our goodbyes also to Josh, SpreadsheetFIFA on Twitter and various places, right?
Yeah, pleasure to be on here. I'm going to go through a bit of a rebrand soon, because obviously,
you're going to have to. Yeah.
FIFA's finishing, and also you put the word spreadsheet in your online handle, people make assumptions. So yeah, it might be very different.
Interesting. And while we're doing the plugs, 𝗏𝗧𝗏, of course, we should plug your newsletter, which will be out by the time people are listening to this, I'm sure.
Sure thing, Ben. It's p2psnacks.substack.com. We'll have full tactics. I'll give some, player reviews and other gameplay tidbits in there, but you can always check out the tactics that I've used before, reference them, try them out. Some are fun, some are maybe not so viable anymore, but if you're looking for inspiration and ideas, that's the place to go.
Oh yeah, and that takes us to the final plug, which is the reason we're all here, and that is the FUT Weekly podcast Patreon, where you can support the podcast, get double the podcast content, and you can do that by subscribing over at bit.ly/morepod, or follow the link in the description of this podcast. And by the time you're listening to this, there may well be a 36,000 FIFA point giveaway going on for Team of the Season over there. So, sign up, subscribe. It's just £3 a month for an extra podcast every week, and you might get more than you spent returned to you through that giveaway. So look out for that. Go over to bit.ly/morepod, or just search support FUT Weekly. And I just thought there is one more plug, actually, because we're edging pretty close to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. I only started putting the podcast on YouTube consistently this cycle, so it's been really nice to see that. If you can subscribe, then please do. If you're listening via YouTube, drop a like, leave a comment. It definitely helps out. And I should also say a huge thank you, of course, to all those supporters who, as I just said, are making this podcast possible. And of course, to those icon patrons: Dave B, 𝘭𝘬𝘬𝘁, Coach 𝘵𝑎𝑠, DJ FIFA Player, Alan G, Alistair, Anthony R, Dominic P, Rob P, Jeff B, Stephen F, Tom B, Damon H, David S, Nick Jack M, Eric T, Neil P, Adam G, Dan W, Waterman, N Hagman, Harry A, Jake G, Roger D, Springford, Elec, Bracco, Nishant, Harry P, Alex M, Lee A, Brendan W, Andrew C, Joe W, Timothy J, Dylan, J Kell, Ibis24, Adam R, Sam K, Graham W, Andy, Ads H2K, and Brian V. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, 𝘭𝘬𝘏, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add, though. FIFA's a bit like life, really. It has its many ups and its many downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.